What if the President of the United States announced a naval blockade of a sovereign nation, demanded they hand over their oil, land, and assets, and explicitly admitted it had nothing to do with the official justification? December 16th, 2025. That's exactly what happened. President Trump posted on Truth Social that Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America, and ordered a total and complete blockade of all oil tankers entering or leaving the country. But here's where it gets explicit. Trump didn't hide behind drug war rhetoric. He openly demanded Venezuela return to the United States of America all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us. Read that again. The president is demanding another country hand over its oil reserves, its land, and its assets, claiming they were stolen from America. Venezuela has 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, the largest in the world. Trump wants it, and he just deployed the most powerful naval force in South American history to take it. This isn't a drug war. This isn't counter-narcotics. This is naked imperial resource extraction, and Trump isn't even pretending otherwise. This is the story of how naval blockades work as wealth extraction mechanisms, why the drug narrative is transparently false, how Trump's own words expose the real motive, and why this follows the exact playbook every empire uses when it can't create wealth anymore and resorts to stealing it from weaker nations. The pattern is clear. When empires need resources, they invent a justification, deploy overwhelming military force, and take what they want while calling it something else. Let's start with what actually happened, because the timeline reveals how quickly this escalated from pressure campaign to active war. Throughout November and early December 2025, the U.S. military conducted at least 25 strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Pacific, killing 95 people the administration claims were drug traffickers. On December 10th, U.S. forces seized a Venezuelan oil tanker called the Skipper loaded with 1.8 million barrels of crude oil. Trump announced the seizure and said, "I assume we're going to keep the oil." Then on December 16th, Trump declared the full blockade, surrounded Venezuela with 11 warships including the USS Gerald R, the world's most advanced aircraft carrier, plus amphibious assault ships, destroyers, submarines, fighter jets, and thousands of troops. This is the largest U.S. military deployment in South America in decades, possibly ever. A 1961 Justice Department memo explicitly states that a blockade is a belligerent act which, as a matter of international law, is ordinarily justified only if a state of war, legal or de facto, exists. Naval blockades are acts of war. Trump just declared war on Venezuela, and Congress didn't authorize it. International law doesn't support it, and the official justification, fighting drug trafficking, is demonstrably false. Here's why the drug narrative is a complete lie, and everyone knows it. Venezuela doesn't produce fentanyl. The country doesn't have the pharmaceutical infrastructure or chemical precursor supply chains necessary to manufacture synthetic opioids at scale. Fentanyl entering the United States comes primarily from China and Mexico, where precursor chemicals are synthesized, and the drug is manufactured in clandestine labs. Venezuela has approximately zero involvement in the fentanyl trade. The Trump administration claims President Maduro leads the Cartel de los Soles, a drug trafficking network allegedly run by Venezuelan military officials. But even if this network exists and moves cocaine through Venezuela, it's a tiny fraction of drugs entering the United States. The vast majority of cocaine and fentanyl comes through the U.S.-Mexico border via established Mexican cartel routes, not through the Caribbean on fishing boats that get blown up by missiles. The 25 boat strikes that killed 95 people represent a statistically insignificant interdiction rate compared to the tonnage of drugs that flow through traditional routes. If this were actually about stopping drugs, the U.S. would be focusing enforcement on the Mexican border, on Chinese precursor chemical manufacturers, on the financial networks that launder cartel money through U.S. banks. Instead, we're bombing fishing boats near Venezuela and seizing oil tankers. This isn't drug interdiction. It's military escalation against an oil-rich country using drugs as pretext, the exact same way the U.S. used weapons of mass destruction as pretext to invade Iraq, humanitarian intervention as pretext to destroy Libya, and fighting terrorism as pretext to occupy Afghanistan for 20 years. But you don't even need to analyze the drug statistics to know this is about oil. Trump explicitly told you. His December 16th Truth Social post demanding Venezuela return to the United States of America all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us is a confession. What oil did Venezuela steal from America? None. Venezuela's oil has been in Venezuela for millions of years. It was never American oil. What Trump means is that American oil companies operated in Venezuela until the 1970s, when the country nationalized its petroleum industry and created PDVSA, the state oil company. American companies like Exxon and Chevron were extracting Venezuelan oil and sending profits back to the United States. When Venezuela took control of its own resources, something every sovereign nation has the right to do, American companies lost access to those profit streams. That's what Trump calls theft. A country controlling its own natural resources is theft from America because we were profiting from them before. This is textbook imperial logic. Resources in your country belong to us if we can profit from them, and if you take control of your own resources, you're stealing from us, which justifies military action to take them back. Trump also claimed Venezuela owes the U.S. for assets America previously held there. What assets? American companies lost investments when Venezuela nationalized industries, but that's the risk of foreign investment, and international law permits nationalization with compensation. Trump isn't talking about legal compensation. He's talking about seizing Venezuela's oil as payment for whatever he decides they owe. And his White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles made the strategy explicit in a Vanity Fair interview published December 16th. He wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. Not until drug trafficking stops. Not until Venezuela changes its behavior. Until Maduro, the elected president of a sovereign nation, cries uncle and presumably hands over control of the country and its resources. This is exactly how every empire operates when it wants resources it doesn't own, and the pattern is so consistent it's almost formulaic. Step 1. Identify resource-rich country with government that won't give you access. Step 2. Invent humanitarian or security justification for intervention, WMDs, drug trafficking, human rights abuses, terrorism, whatever sells domestically. Step 3. Deploy overwhelming military force to demonstrate you can destroy them if they don't comply. Step 4. Impose economic warfare through sanctions and blockades to starve the population and create crisis. Step 5. Demand regime change or direct resource access as condition for ending military pressure. Step 6. Either the government falls and you install friendly regime that gives you resource access, or you invade directly and take them. The United States did this in Iraq, claimed WMDs, deployed military, imposed sanctions, invaded, took control of oil fields, and U.S. companies got extraction contracts. Britain did this in China during the Opium Wars, imposed naval blockade, demanded trade concessions, bombarded ports, forced China to open markets on British terms. Spain did this throughout the Americas, claimed they were Christianizing savages, deployed military, conquered territory, extracted all the gold and silver they could ship back to Europe. Every single empire in history has used the same playbook because it works. Claim noble motive, use military force, extract resources. Venezuela is following this exact sequence right now. Here's why this matters beyond Venezuela and why it reveals how late-stage empires actually operate. The United States is the world's largest oil producer. We extract more oil than any country in history and are a net oil exporter. We don't need Venezuela's oil for energy security. We don't have an oil shortage. We don't have an energy crisis. But Venezuela has 303 billion barrels of proven reserves, the largest in the world, currently controlled by a government that won't give American companies favorable access. From an imperial extraction perspective, those reserves represent trillions of dollars in potential profit that's currently going to Venezuela instead of to ExxonMobil, Chevron, and American investors. The U.S. empire in 2025 faces a fundamental problem. We can't create enough wealth through productive economy to maintain global dominance, fund $36 trillion in debt, support military spending of $877 billion annually, and provide rising living standards to the population. When empires reach this stage, when they can't create wealth fast enough, they switch from creation mode to extraction mode. They stop building things and start taking things. They stop investing in productive capacity and start seizing other countries' resources. Rome did this in the 3rd century when they stopped expanding productively and started extracting everything they could from existing provinces through taxation and debasement. Spain did this after the silver from the Americas ran out and they had no productive economy to fall back on. Britain did this when they couldn't compete with American and German industrial production and resorted to extracting maximum wealth from colonies. The Soviet Union did this when their economy stagnated and they tried to hold together an empire through military force without the economic capacity to sustain it. Every empire follows this pattern, and the United States is following it now. We're not invading Venezuela because we need to, we're invading because we can, because they have resources we want, and because taking them is easier than fixing our broken economy. What comes next follows a predictable sequence. Trump has positioned the largest naval force in South American history off Venezuela's coast. He's demanded they hand over oil, land, and assets. He's designated Maduro's government a terrorist organization. He's said repeatedly that land strikes are coming soon. The military buildup, the blockade, the explicit demands. These aren't negotiations, they're ultimatums. Either Maduro steps down and allows a U.S.-friendly government that gives American companies access to oil, or the U.S. invades. There's no third option once you've deployed this much military force and made public demands. If Trump backs down now without getting what he demanded, U.S. power looks weak and every other country learns they can resist American pressure. If Maduro doesn't comply, Trump has to follow through with invasion or look impotent. The sequence is locked in, and everything points toward military intervention in 2026. This will be sold as liberation, as democracy promotion, as fighting narco-terrorism. But it will be resource extraction, pure and simple, following the exact playbook of every imperial war for resources in history. The only question is whether Americans will recognize the pattern or accept the justification we're given. This is the empire economy, where we decode the mechanisms operating in plain sight but rarely explained honestly. Trump just told you explicitly he wants Venezuela's oil, land, and assets. He deployed the military to take them. He's not hiding it. The blockade isn't about drugs, it's about resources. It's always about resources. And when empires need resources they can't create, they take them from countries too weak to resist. Venezuela is next. The pattern is repeating exactly as it always does, and we're watching it happen in real time.